So now I'm really happy to kind of bring to the stage our Design for Government team. We have Núria and Marco and Seungho and Ramir joining us to the stage. So I will set up the screen and they will introduce themselves in more detail. Welcome them with applause, please.
Very nice to see many of you, some familiar faces. I'd like to thank first the organizers of this incredible event, including Ani and Eze, and the organizations that support this. And also I'd like to acknowledge my partners in crime, Juha Kronqvist and Hella Hedenberg. It's a privilege to represent their story myself. And also I'd like to thank the countless others in Aalto University and elsewhere that helped award this course, including the 200 or so brilliant and very ambitious students from all across the globe that are now working to make difference in different parts of the world. Let me introduce myself. I am Seungho Park-Lee. I'm a researcher and designer. Now I work in Ulsan National Institute of Science and Technology in Korea. But before that, I was in Aalto doing my doctoral study, and I built this course called Design for Government in 2014. The course thus far has been working with 10 different ministries, almost all ministries in Finland, except the Defense and Justice. And also we have worked with the Prime Minister's office quite closely. We have trained 254 students, and our pillars include empathic design, systems thinking, and behavioral insight. And knowing this by Núria and Ramya a bit later, the world is now a different place, as we can see in this conference. But when I was working for Marco in the Strategic Design Unit at the Finnish Innovation Fund, Sitra, or more widely known as Helsinki Design Lab, this unit was one of the few that was pioneering the use of design in the government to renew our public services, public policy, and public institutions. But there was another push in Finland, which is Aalto University, at then University of Art and Design Helsinki, contributing significantly to empathic design and working with municipal governments. And right after the merger happened between art school, business school, and technology school, there was a call for interdisciplinary courses that invite students from all across major. And I applied for the idea of design for government. It looks like I was into the story too much. I didn't change the slides. So with World Design Capital 2012, Helsinki came more opportunities. And design exchange program initiated by the Strategic Design Unit at Sitra, hired designers in the government, in the ministries for 2 years. My partner in crime, Hella Hedenberg, was working for the Ministry of the Environment back then. And with her, we could persuade the ministry to work with us, to give us a project and budget. All this is to say that not only the course was under the influence of the Strategic Design Unit of Sitra, but also Aalto University. But I must say that we were just very lucky people at the right place at the right time. It was so easy for us to create this course. Not that we didn't work hard. We worked incredibly hard to make this course work and flourish. But then when we tried to open the doors were open. And then the ministry didn't have any problem trusting us. The Aalto University didn't have any problem trusting a master's degree holder, a young person with very little experience, with an idea. That is where the public servants had enough autonomy and they could get us a project and budget without so much bureaucracy. Couple meetings, couple of pages of document, that was all it took. Then I left Finland in 2019 to work for this institution I work for now. And my ambition was to build something similar or bigger. I did a bit of that, but I had to change my strategy quite a bit. Where Finland has a big government and flat organizations, South Korea has small government and extremely hierarchical organizations. Only reason, about 90% of the public servants are hired through a national exam. Only 10% make up the expert pool. The catch here is that these experts get 2-year contract or something, and then they have very little autonomy, they have very little power over budget allocation. What is more, there's a job rotation system in place for all public servants, and every 2 years or as short as 6 months, almost all the public servants get a new position. And even against their consent or their will. I recently had a project, a government research project with 2 ministries and 1 municipality. My counterpart in the municipality has changed twice, and their bosses changed twice, and the people in the ministry, 2 ministries, and the intermediate organization changed only in 1 year. What this makes is a public institutions with a very low level of expertise and in any area, and very little autonomy. Because of this, they need to get permission from anyone from the top. Now my approach to making a difference in Korea has shifted from design in government towards design for policy ecosystem. Public policy is often manifested in a connected and distributed way. And I would say the wicked problems we need to fix today, and the complex challenges often lie in between different institutions, or in between private and public entities. For example, achieving carbon neutrality in delivering essential public services. How can we solve that? What if, despite the good intentions, a new circular cup service end up becoming just greenwashing for the lack of life cycle assessment measurement tool? Who will build such a tool and maintain such a tool if the companies don't make money and the public institutions are incapable of understanding the need? Now, this may not be unique to South Korea. Designers in other nations, especially those in Asian countries, may face similar things. Does this resonate to some of you? Yeah? Good. Then it's about time to diversify our approach, I guess. And also think about what kind of research and teaching we can do together and share learnings together. And hope the next 10 years will provide us with the opportunities to do so. Now I hand over to my microphone to Núria and Ramya, and get their perspective about continuing this course and expanding and deepening the course.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Either way. So these are some of the slides. This is us. This is us in 2019. You can see here our colleagues Tani Lee, Heinonen, Krishalpart, and then Seungho, Ramya, and me. This was a handover. This was the last year that Ramya Mase was the director of the course, and then she handed over to me, which was a privilege. And then together, this is one of the developments that we included in the course. For me, there was several turning points in my mind, and I don't know, it might have felt more gradually within the course and the student experience, even the teaching team. But there's a few things that really, for me, shifted this course in particular ways. And Ani, your exercise or the collective group exercise on the tables at the dinner last night prompted me to think about these kind of tipping points in my way, and in particular in relation to this course. And for me,
this diagram was one of them. So the course started with these building blocks, these three different building blocks woven together: empathic, human centered design, systems design, behavioral insight, or change oriented design. And those were quite different approaches, uniquely put together. But what kind of design did that build up into was one of the things that I think we thought about. And students asked us. There were students not only from design, but from all disciplines and multiple universities. So, what is design when it's not only designers doing it, and when you're weaving together multiple disciplinary perspectives into a course? And for me, this diagram, which is inspired and built on Andreas Jodmock from the UK Policy Lab, her styles of government intervention, was really useful because it mapped out a range of different, I would say, design objects or things that design could be applied to in the government context. And for me, coming with a background in architecture, I also found myself there. Obviously, architecture has been around longer than what we now see everywhere, the service design, but still architecture has had these arrangements, these briefs, these interactions with government for hundreds of years, designing the public sector, designing public interactions, designing the perceptions of the rulers and the citizenry, the public life, etc. And you can even find that kind of design on this diagram, which is a bit difficult for me to point at specifically. You also find nudging on here, a range of wider uh, behavioral insight oriented design. You find a range of different ways that design can intervene into nudging behavior, into the architectures which kind of govern and order social and public life, all the way through to service design applied to public services, programs, even the design of institutions can be found in this diagram. So it kind of framed a space for design beyond even our narrow design disciplines and the design that's taught in design schools, and presented a range of possible instruments or objects of design that our students could consider when it came to the point in the course after their extensive research of making a proposed intervention. And then they could draw on their own backgrounds. If they came from the business school, they might orient more towards organization design or designing new programs or designing training or professional competence building. If they came from design, they might focus more on the service touch points, the look and feel of the public service delivery. So there were different ways that different disciplines could find themselves collaboratively into a map like this. I found this very, very useful indeed.
And I think that it's interesting that we were trying also here to visualize two directions. We were saying the government. So you see in the vertical, it says it maps the instruments that are traditional, hard power, control, and command here at the bottom, and at the top, the more distributed voluntary instruments that are more typical part of the repertoire of the designer. And where, as we were saying, hey, government should go up the ladder, and then designers should go down the ladder and work with the instruments of government. We were doing the opposite direction. We were saying, government, hey, expand downstream, that designers go upstream. So we were upstreaming design in the course. We were asking our students, let's not see this as a service design challenge. Let's start using, I don't know, some of the regulatory financial instruments also as part of the design proposal.
This was very useful for us when we started seeing other related courses springing up, even the parallel course that possibly predated design for government, the design for services course, which worked with municipal governments, where a very different kind of design could happen closer to the people, closer to the citizens, closer to the frontline public policy deliverers. Um, and that was more of a service design orientation, whereas this was not. And we puzzled in many discussions and over years, really, what was the difference between the courses? Because you need to know that in order to provide the pedagogical foundations for the students. Why do we need two precious, expensive, big courses at Aalto that are working in government because they're doing quite different kinds of work in government. And this was one of the really, I think, useful tools for the conversations for teachers as well.
And I think it evolved also to the point in which we also jump into the train of this design for policy discourse, and that many of us here are even framing ourselves now. It's not the service design, maybe it's design for policy. Is it a discipline? We don't know. And we started to think about looking at policy more, including lectures about what's policy making. And here, this you can see that we take it to the extreme, thinking that policy. I was imagining policy as the object of design, to the extreme that we see today. This is a recent project by our students, 2024. Who is in the audience? Arpa, please. She's one of the authors of this image. It led us to have naturally project briefs and proposals that tackle the policymaking process itself. So innovating the process of policymaking has become the object of design.
I think this is really, really essential. And I think it's not only that policy enters into the classroom, but the background work that the teachers have done to frame policy as an object of design, I think is a great credit to you, Núria, and the co-teaching team. The briefing process, which happens well before the students enter the classroom, is something of a collaboration between the teachers and the ministries, and many possible ministries, of which one might produce a brief for the course. And setting that out in a frame from their big ideas and their agendas and their matters of concern and urgency into something in the size and shape of something that students, multidisciplinary students, can craft, can research in a very limited short span of time, but still produce granular insights and ambitious policy designs. That intermediary stage is the briefing process, which happens behind the scenes, the co-teachers and the ministries. Seungho has done a lot of research actually on the briefing in public sector and set up the initial framework for that briefing co-design process. And Núria has been working really hard to kind of frame that also in a deeper way and a more extensive way, to kind of wrangle those big government things into kind of graspable design objects, which then can be met with designs for policy.
And that necessary has led us, this is our website, please take a look. During these 10 years, we have been documenting every single project. We have been collaborating. And if you see, this is just a screenshot of our projects and up until 2021. But if you see the top ones, this is the most recent projects that we have been working with are critical, time sensitive, and core to policy change in Finland and core to the political and government programs. And this is the work that I'm doing now with my colleague Marco, that I have a privilege now to have as part of the Design for Government team since it's been a year now. And so what we see when we start the process of looking for partners and for projects, we receive also this type of projects that require innovating the policymaking process itself. And then we are necessarily, of course, with this mindset of upstreaming design and looking at policy as the object of design, then we also get these project briefs that include these more policy critical changes that we are trying to improve. And also I wanted to point out that a phenomena that we start to see also is that the projects that we receive demand an orchestrator, demands a space that sometimes is somewhat there but not formalized. This is the example of policy coherence project that we have this year. And you will hear more today if you stay in this room with our researcher Emilia Veselova and Eva Furman from the Prime Minister Office, who is Secretary General of the National Sustainable Development in Finland. You will hear more about them, but what they are trying is like, hey, biodiversity is not something up for the Ministry of Environment. It's something that has a stake also in the Ministry of Defense. But how do we orchestrate this? How can we have this conversation across ministries horizontally, but also vertically, also with our agencies and our services, so that we can implement it? So necessarily it requires somebody who orchestrates this. And we've kind of thought maybe the Prime Minister Office is the orchestrator. And this happens again and again. Also last year with the live events of a dignified old age, DVV, the Digital Data Population Services here, we kind of see them as the orchestrators of applying an approach of organizing services according to the life of people. We see this phenomena emerging in our project briefs, our partners kind of needing us to form a working group that is cross-cutting and plays the role of the orchestrators. And this is where we are now with Marco. Also, we have an open call. So if in the audience there's someone from a ministry in Finland, from a Finnish agency and wants to collaborate, please come talk to us. We are now very open to look for challenges for the next year. And now I'd like to invite my colleague Marco Steinberg to talk about the past and the future.
Great. Thanks, Núria. And thank you all. Terrific to listen to all of this. So let me just make sure. Yes. So I've had the privilege of working with government, then in government, and now for government. And I think each one brings a slightly different perspective. And I wanted to bookend this conversation a little bit. What is sort of thinking before or design for government, and then maybe projecting a little bit, nudging us a little bit to think about what the future sort of could be. This is a picture. I know my colleague Justin would be terrified that I'm showing a giant version of him up screen, but we were in rural Texas, flying with the emergency services in a region where there are more goats than people. And the question was, how do you deliver healthcare where you don't have the centralized structures and networks of traditional healthcare delivery? And at the time, we were wrapping up a 4-year initiative to redesign healthcare in the US for stroke patients. And what we realized early on, this is about 2002, that these big socioeconomic questions were ultimately design questions. They did not have causal relationships that were linear. The solution was not going to be, in a way, would not emerge by analyzing the current. And there was no single intervention or single policy that could solve this issue. It really required what we would end up calling an architecture of a solution, which today I would sort of call a portfolio approach. How do you strategically bring many kinds of design initiatives under a design structure that allows for continual learning and change to happen? This experience was quite useful because it did a few things. It allowed us to develop a way of doing this work, to communicate it. And I think, at least in us, it made us quite aware that there was a huge demand for design. But perhaps design is slightly different capacity than we had thought. And there was a complementary dimension of design between the more well-entrenched ways of thinking about it around products and services, which were very important, to maybe this kind of newer frontier of thinking about portfolios, systems, and socioeconomic challenges. And how do we bring these two worlds together? So it showed that there was a need. It showed that there was a community, because we were beginning to bump into small pockets of designers doing fantastic work in Chile, Elemental, Roseanne Haggerty in New York, many pockets of people really trying to innovate on big socioeconomic challenges. And I had the opportunity to work at Citra, It looked something like this back then, 2008. And the question was, how do we begin to bring design to government? The relationship cannot be of consultancy. This is, at least we were imagining, a strategic capacity that governments need to have, because ultimately they're facing design problems. And this is where I had then the great opportunity of meeting Seungho, and Justin joined, and Brian, and we build a bit of a team around this. And as Seungho mentioned, sort of Helsinki Design Lab is probably the front that most people would be familiar with, but other initiatives like Low to No, Brickstarter, Open Kitchen were part of that broader portfolio of initiatives that we were sort of doing. And back then, the idea was that there's an emerging community of designers. They're few, but there's practice happening, and there's a big client pool of government that own these problems. How can we begin to bring them together? And I think very much in the spirit of what we're doing now in the classroom is, how do we build connections between these two interested parties? In June 10th, 2013, we winded down Helsinki Design Lab, an initiative. I think this is also an interesting maybe conversation that in the early days, what were the vehicles to push some of this sort of knowledge, this community? And I think in retrospect, we see that a lot of these initiatives were perhaps quite short-lived. And I think that probably has a lot to do also with champions and stakeholders in government, and how much oxygen is provided for some of this work. But I think nonetheless, it demonstrated, as you can see from this picture in our closing event, that there's quite a big community at that point of practitioners out there. This is from just before COVID. I had the opportunity of leading a team in Uruguay, helping the government rethink its biggest direct investment in Uruguay. Happened to be a Finnish company, UPM, and they were considering building a big factory. And so how do you use these investments to rethink how development and what is the development strategy around that? And I think I'm just telling this story because I think, as Núria had said, one of the promises or assumptions we had sort of made was that design, yes, could go horizontal in service design and help spread that and all of the corners that would be useful, but that there was a vertical component of this, that design could go upstream and become more and more strategic and actually helping frame some of these big issues. And I continually come across governments that have an appetite for design. So I think the ask is still there, but I think in retrospect, if we look at it, maybe we haven't been as upstream as we can. So I think from a course perspective, there's a couple things that come to mind to me. We were talking about this the other day. One is, how do we begin to, in a way, codify how you teach this kind of work? And I think with the eye of teaching it in real time, because we're constantly learning in practice what works and what doesn't work. The second is, how do we then start to go beyond individual courses and really think about vehicles? If we were thinking about traditional vehicles, we would say degree programs. Where's the School of Government meeting with the School of Design, for example? How can we do careers and begin that kind of sort of path? And I think maybe then the third thing to start doing is to think about career paths. One of the questions I frequently get asked for is, how do I get a job? Many of you have jobs, but it's not always very self-evident in that. And my probably unsatisfying answer is experience. The more experience you get, the more experience it begets. And there's a kind of virtuous cycle that as you get more experience, you become more valuable in this kind of context. But I think we need to maybe institutionalize it a little bit more. What are these pathways to allow people to not just get into government, but help pursue the vertical dimension within government? I'm going to sit down. Thank you.
5 minutes, great. So maybe we can pass it to the audience if we want to hear also like your journey, what your hopes have been, like when you entered into this world, into this journey of design for government. We want to hear from you also, if you could share your story, hopes that you had and where you see it going.
Hello. So I'm going to be a little bit naughty and actually ask a question. Hello. I wonder, I took the DFG course. Mm, because earlier this conference, someone said that deciding for government is like passing the baton, and you might be a part of like a big team and multiple teams over generations. So I'm wondering, is DFG ever gonna do a case that's already been worked on and see, hmm, how how could we implement this? Because that's more of the vertical issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah. Um, we are working on this. Now we are thinking about, for example, last year we were working with Kela and Lansiudema
I see what you mean. Yes.
uh, together with the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health. Somewhat, we are trying to involve them more, and another set of stakeholders to THL and so forth. About continuity of care. They're thinking about continuity of care as a model in healthcare in Finland. And then our partners in crime, their design team in Kela said, what about we partner for 3 years? And we thought, perfect. This is, no, this could address the issue in a way. Like, can we have projects that also reflect these long-term programs that we have, that are these political cycles also, like it takes 4 years to develop something. So we are thinking about these longer terms also partnerships that allows us to iterate, to see the project through, and allow the time also in between.
Hi, I don't know if this answers Nuria's initial question at all, but I kind of wanted to sing your praises. I'm Evi Saarikoski. I'm also an alumni of the course from, I think, the second year. Um, and this was an incredibly influential course in terms of where I ended up as a designer. So during this course, I really realized, like, okay, public services, this is where I want to be at. And now, I guess 7, 8, 9 years later, how much is it? Almost 10 years later, I'm working at the Finnish tax administration. So I really wanted to say thanks. And also, maybe you'll get a call from the tax administration.
Is that a good thing?
That's a very good thing. I hope Mariana Salgado, a collaborator of the course. Yes, I wanted to say that I started to work in the public sector in Finland in 2017 when my bosses participated in one of your shows. So, in the Finnish Immigration Service, they went to one of the Design for Government big shows, and they realized, cool, what they are doing there for the ministries. We could like to start an innovation and design lab. And then I was hired there. So I wanted to ask you why the shows and how the shows have been influential, because I think part of the course that I did not have the chance to take myself, but I was one of the clients when I was in the ministry. Um, that was super nice collaboration at that time. But I wanted to ask you about the show because that had a big impact within the public sector here, and you have put a lot of effort in that format.
Yeah, I will probably start answering that, and then maybe Ramya can continue. Yeah, I will. I was working for Marco at Helsinki Design Lab initiative, and then I learned so much from that. Like how important it is to share what we do, and then share them in a proper way. So we spent a lot of time making that website and basically documenting everything we do, and it was very intentional for us to create the final event as a show, and then we wanted to put it as a good display, and so that it can actually make a buzz within the public sector, especially ministries. So yeah, it was very intentional, and we put a lot of effort, and we made posters. We put here and there. We sent emails, and we invited everyone to come. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but fun.
And actually, that's important that the show is not just a show off. The show is a pedagogical moment, and we build it into the course. So we train the students in communication skills, how to tell a story that's evidence based, how to make an argument that's solid for a broad public and a civil servant audience. So it's not only that they're designing the proposed intervention, presenting their research, they're actually crafting an argument and learning how to do that in public for that kind of unknown kind of government civil service audience as well. It's a pedagogical thing doing the show in a way.
Yeah.
So there are multiple outputs of the course, multiple results also for the ministries. One, they get a brief, which is in itself a result. Then they get the interactions with the students, young, diverse, multidisciplinary students that they don't meet inside of the halls of government, right? They also get then education experience. Often they're learning by doing what the students show in the mid-review, what the students show as their process along the way. They're learning how the designers start doing the kind of work even before they get the final outcome, the proposed intervention, and the set of slides, which shows the evidence behind that, as well as the video of the presentation. So there's lots of different pedagogical thoughts behind this, as well as outputs for the ministries as well.
Absolutely.
One last thing, Ramya worked very hard to get us a Creative Commons license. We work on the Creative Commons license study agreement, so everything that it's produced in the course can be used by anybody. So that's how we also close this session, by pointing you back into our website, flick through the work of our students. These are based on real challenges that are happening in Finland. And if you find something inspiring that resonates to what you're working on at the moment, you can use it. Just credit our students.
Can I just say one very quick thing on the pedagogy thing is we think frequently of pedagogy with relation to students. And I think you sort of had it embedded, but I want to really highlight there's a pedagogical aspect also for civil servants and politicians in this. If we went to Andrea's chart, there are the kind of hard things to do, the rules and regulations, the things that take a lot of time and effort to change. But there's the softer stuff, which is probably norms, routines within government that actually shape a lot of things and how decisions are made. And so I think when we do things out in the open, we're also modeling behaviors. And we're showing that there are no secrets in government, and that you can think out loud, and you can put up your work, and you can have a critical discourse about what's happening in a psychologically safe environment. And I think it's our duty to model that. So I think there's that pedagogical aspect also to the participants from the government side of it. So yes, do join us.
Let's give a big applause to everyone.